college football playoffs will debut a new set of rankings, and the Gamecocks are going to be in there again, and so will Clemson. But the question is, how high will South Carolina be? We're going to run the gamut with you. We're going to let you answer all the questions. We know you've been crunching the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. First and foremost, happy Thanksgiving to you and your children and your wife and your entire family.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, Thanksgiving always falls on Carolina Clemson week. That means a lot of food Thursday, some PS5, NCAA football, and then Saturday's big game. So, yeah, we're all excited. You guys know where our family stands on that.
Yeah, yeah. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. Well, Carolina tonight, they were 18th last week in the CFP. Just to be blunt, where do you think they'll be ranked tonight?
I think they'll be 15th. And a few things to consider here. The Gamecocks need to be at worst in the middle of Alabama and Ole Miss, I think, to have a legitimate shot at this thing. I'm not sure they can hop both teams they lost to in the pecking order with the win over Clemson. And, you know, I've been asked about 100 times in the last 72 hours, who should Gamecock fans be rooting for this weekend? I think it's an Auburn win over Alabama. That would be major in the Iron Bowl. Obviously, Mississippi State over Ole Miss, though I do not think Ole Miss will be ranked higher than the Gamecocks tonight. Could be wrong on that, but my projection is South Carolina over them. And then Texas over A&M. You want to make sure the Aggies are out of this mix. Gamecocks hold the head-to-head. But if the Aggies beat Texas and then win the SEC at 10-3, they're in. Purdue over Indiana would certainly help, and Maryland over Penn State. So that's 5 games I think would certainly help South Carolina. A 9-3 Gamecock team would get in over a 10-win Penn State or Indiana.
Vanderbilt over Tennessee too, because South Carolina's resume, if you because they didn't play, so you have to go.
JC, yep.
And Tennessee hadn't, everybody loves points, and Tennessee hadn't been scoring. So I think Tennessee's a pretty damn good team, but they got a 10-point win at Oklahoma. Carolina's got a 26-point win at Oklahoma. They will have lost at Vanderbilt. Carolina's got a 21-point win at Vanderbilt. So there's your common opponents.
Yeah.
They did beat Alabama, but that was in Knoxville by 7. Carolina lost to the Tide by 2. Other than that, and then they have a bad loss, or really Vanderbilt they'll be 7-5 if they win. That would be an iffy loss. And they did lose to an Arkansas team that's 6-6 or 7-5. Gamecocks don't have a bad loss. So what do you think about that?
I think the Gamecocks need the SEC to be a 4-bid league to get in this thing. And for that to happen, then you either have to have the Big Ten get 3 teams in. Ohio State, Oregon are locked, and then you have either Indiana or Penn State. Or maybe you have the ACC be a 1-bid league. And with Alabama's loss last week, if I'm projecting right now, I think the ACC will be a 2-bid league with SMU in Miami. So further chaos there would certainly help. An Indiana loss to Purdue would help. Maryland upsetting Penn State would. And like you said, JC, Tennessee losing to Vandy. I do think Tennessee losing to Vandy would be probably the biggest surprise out of all these games, or either Indiana losing to Purdue, because I haven't seen the spread, but I'm sure Indiana's a 3 or 4 touchdown favorite.
Purdue's.
They're
god awful. And Maryland's capable of surprising some teams, but they're like 4-43 all time against Penn State. That's kind of a rivalry. They're sort of close together. When Larry Johnson was at Penn State, he used to go into DC and take all Maryland's players. I mean, because it's straight shot up the road. I think Southern Cal beating Notre Dame calls Notre Dame's bid into question just because of the losses, and then they're riding high on that A&M win, but
that was my next question: is what does a 10-2 Notre Dame look like?
So I'm one of the few that thinks Notre Dame is locked in right now. I wrote a story for CBS this week, sort of tiering which teams are locked. I think there's 4 playoff locks right now, 2 from the Big Ten, 1 from the SEC, and Notre Dame. Not to mention the A&M win, but they've also beaten Georgia Tech, who handed Miami its only loss. They beat Louisville, who was the highest ranked 3-loss team before South Carolina moved up in the polls. They've knocked off 2 service academies who were ranked and unbeaten at the time of the game. And the spread's only like 5.5 points right now against USC. So I think Notre Dame tonight is going to be ranked 4th or 5th. And if that's the case, there's just too many spots to fall. if they lose to USC. One more matchup, too, I'll be watching this weekend is Miami at Syracuse. If Syracuse can beat Miami at home, Miami finishes 10-2, does not make it to Charlotte next week. Maybe the Gamecocks at 9-3 obviously have a better resume than Miami. Maybe Miami gets the boot, but I do think Miami, for whatever reason, the committee's been super high on them this year because of Cam Ward and all the numbers. But game control has sucked for Miami. They should have lost to Virginia Tech. They were down 20 points to Cal. They could have lost to Duke. I mean, they only have one loss on the resume, but Miami right now is a team that I think will be one and done in the postseason.
Georgia Tech beat them, and Haynes King couldn't even throw the ball.
Yeah,
he was hurt. I mean, that's the dumb. The Miami and SMU, the ACC getting two is probably one of the dumber things I've ever heard in the history of college football. I don't get it. The Big 12 teams are better. The Big 12 teams are better than they are. I mean, I think Colorado.
How about Arizona State? What about Arizona State and how high they continue to jump?
Yeah.
Brad?
I've got them projected at 13 tonight, above South Carolina with an 8-spot jump. But the reason for that, I mean, I think the Gamecocks would certainly be favored on a neutral field. But the reason for that is the committee is going to have to justify its projected Big 12 champion getting in. I don't think they're going to keep out the Big 12 champion. I could be wrong if there's a multi-loss team there winning that league because there's certainly some chaos scenarios in which it could happen. But Arizona State is, riding strong. They don't have really any quality wins right now except for that victory over BYU last week. But I'm not quite as high on the Big 12 as everybody else. It's been kind of a black and blue league. I would have more of an issue of the Big 12 getting two teams in than I would the ACC.
Yeah, it's Kansas playing best ball in that league
Yeah,
right
they
now,
are.
and Arizona State. So I got a question. So clarify. So there's no auto bids really then. So if Tulane happened, like let's say there's more chaos in the
That's
Big
right,
12,
JC,
and so Tulane could actually we could see because of the 5 highest
Correct. Yeah.
conference champions.
One of our comments in the chat from Colin Baxter says the champion is an automatic bid. It's actually not. So the 5 highest ranked conference champions get in. There is no automatic Power 4 champions get in. The Big 12 could foreseeably be out of this playoff, but I think it would have really helped had Army beaten Notre Dame last week and then Tulane beaten Army. Then you would have 2 G5 champions in with Boise State. And I'm not convinced that Boise State's a lock right yet. I didn't put the Broncos in as my lock this week. I still think they could lose to Colorado State in a couple of weeks, and Tulane or Army possibly get that G5 bid. The G5 does get an automatic bid with the highest ranked champion, but right now that's Boise State. That could certainly change.
Yeah, but for me, that's the justification for having Arizona State so high is so that they will not have to worry about having 2 Group 5 champions in there, because perceptually that just makes everything they've done look bad.
That's correct.
Well,
territorial
which brings the whole system into question.
Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, I mean, he would have been bashing this whole playoff system if, let's say, Colorado won the Big 12 and Coach Prime and them did not get voted in. We know that wouldn't happen. So, I mean, the whole point of this was, to get equal representation across the country. And I do think the Big 12, despite it being not a very good conference this season, I think it'll get the champion in.
What about this scenario? South Carolina beats Clemson. Syracuse beats Miami, which could happen. Syracuse is what, 8-3?
Yep.
Fran Brown, and they got Kyle McCord. It's up there, isn't it? Is it up there?
It is.
I mean, strange things happen, and that dreams go to die in that dome sometimes. Seriously. They're not messing around.
Yeah, JC.
So they win, and so Clemson gets in. They have home field advantage against SMU and Charlotte. SMU's played nobody. They beat them. Clemson's in. Does that help South Carolina having then beaten the ACC champs?
Without a doubt. I think if Syracuse beats Miami this week, Gamecocks handle Clemson, then Gamecock fans are going to be rooting for the Tigers to win the ACC. If that's the case, I mean, Gamecock's resume is going to outlast a lot of these other 3-loss SEC teams that they're going to be in the mix with. And I know a lot of folks have mentioned, they don't have the head-to-head against Bama and Ole Miss. Head-to-head is only taken into consideration when the committee deems schools equal. So the last 6 weeks, South Carolina has looked better on field and in results than Crimson Tide and Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss has the best win out of those three programs after beating Georgia. But Ole Miss is going to fall substantially in tonight's rankings. That's why I think it's vital, fellas, for South Carolina to be in the middle tonight of Alabama and Ole Miss. If the Gamecocks are like 16th or 17th, probably too many spots to climb.
I just continue to see this wild vision in my head of somehow, some way we get into late December and South Carolina and Clemson are playing in a playoff game. The way that this could actually legitimately unfold. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine? Yeah, I mean, it's bonkers to even think that that's possible. Okay, you mentioned just a little while ago that you would have 4 teams right now that you think are locks.
Yes.
You said 2 out of the Big Ten, which I'm assuming is Oregon and Ohio State.
That's correct.
Notre Dame, and you said 1 out of the SEC. Is that Texas?
Texas right now, despite not having a win over a top 25 team. Isn't that something?
Well, my question is why? Yeah, what if they lose?
How low that second number is? I mean, is that it?
Well, it really helped Texas that Bama and Ole Miss got beat because a 10-win SEC team now – there's not as many as we thought they'd be here in 2 weeks. You're going to have Tennessee finish 10-2 by beating Vanderbilt. You're going to have Texas at worst finishing 10-2. There's a chance that A&M beats Texas and then loses to Georgia in the SEC championship, and they're 9-4 playing in like Las Vegas. That's how crazy this conference has been this season. A&M squandered a huge opportunity last week, losing to Auburn. That was one of those, dozens of scenarios that worked out in the Gamecocks' favor. A lot of my biggest fans on the Big Spur message board are mad at me for saying, 3 weeks ago, I didn't see a path. That was before 36 results happened that played in South Carolina's favor. That kind of stuff looks out for the Gamecocks, but it has.
Dude, I almost put a $5 parlay on everything the Gamecocks needed to have happen. And I would have
JC, you would have had to split some of that money with me, man. That'd have been a heck of a bet.
That would have been, yeah. I'm kicking myself. If I'd have just done the 8 SEC games, I'd have been doing pretty well. Alabama, Oklahoma was the one I just wasn't sure about. I was like, Oklahoma just doesn't have the firepower on offense.
I thought it would be competitive.
I didn't see a 3-touchdown Sooners, and then Jackson Arnold running for 134 yards.
Well, Oklahoma followed the Gamecocks playbook too. I mean, Bama did not have an answer passing or throwing for Lenora Sellers and then did not play a running quarterback until last week. And OU did the same thing. So Bama's DC, the former guy from Washington, he's struggled this year. And DeBoer might make a move there. But, Bama is just not a playoff team right now. And if it does come down to the final seed, 12 seed being Bama or South Carolina, if Bama gets put in over the Gamecocks, it'll solely be because of brand recognition. You can't tell me anything otherwise.
I don't know.
Cannot agree with that more. 100%.
Yeah, it'll happen. It's always happened. I mean, it happened with the Independence Bowl a few years back. Look, I don't know that the Iron Bowl, if it were in Auburn, I think everybody would be thinking, that could be an Auburn win.
Yeah.
Auburn doesn't play as well in Tuscaloosa. But, man, those kids at Auburn are going to be fired up. Auburn's had talent all year. They've just had their head in their backside. If they can avoid turnovers and get some big plays down the field, Hugh Freeze is – he's bad. When he's bad, he's really bad. But when he's good, he's really good, Yeah.
I'm sending as many guys as I can against Jalen Milroe. No disrespect to him, but when he has pressure on him, he does not know what to do with the football. That's why Bama fans are calling for Ty Simpson right now because Jalen is really strapped them in the passing game. So if Auburn tackles well Saturday, man, they got a chance to win the Iron Bowl.
All right, obviously we want to talk to you about Clemson and South Carolina, the actual football game too, Brad, and then certainly want to get your thoughts on what's happening up in Chapel Hill. Well, let me throw one more scenario in here, at least on my end, as it pertains to the playoffs. So Georgia is expected to beat Georgia Tech this weekend and be shocked if they didn't. They'd finish 10-2 and they'd be in Atlanta, I believe, for the
they're locked in,
SEC championship game. Mm-hmm. But if they lose that game, they fall to 10-3. What does that do for the Dogs, and how does it affect South Carolina?
So Georgia gets in over South Carolina as the SEC's lone 3-loss representative, in my opinion. Now, if Georgia loses to Georgia Tech, that's one reason I didn't put Georgia Tech on my list of, games to watch for Gamecock fans, because even a loss to the Yellow Jackets, it makes the SEC championship game a must-win for Georgia. SEC champions in, regardless of how many losses they have and all that. But I do think Georgia, if they lose to Texas in the SEC championship, they would get in over South Carolina, because for whatever reason, the committee respects, a couple of those big-time wins that Georgia has. The one at Texas is the one that I'm pointing at. And then beating Tennessee was big too. So that's 2 top 10 wins that the Gamecocks don't have right now.
Right.
I don't think we're going to see a 3-loss team in the SEC make the playoff, but it certainly could happen.
I'll say this. Well, I think the SEC deserves 5 bids and deserves 2 South Carolina out of it. I mean, this is ridiculous, Brad, because I mean, the SEC, it's not just South Carolina. Everybody except Texas. And is it a surprise that the one team that had by far the easiest slate in the conference this year is the first place team in the conference? Nobody's talking about that.
Texas,
mighty Texas. What the hell ever? They beat an average team on the road in Michigan. Average, very average. And that's gotten a million miles. And the one good team they played, they lost by 15 at home when we're down 23-0. They got their butt kicked.
They beat
but everybody
3 points on the road. And I've been joking with some folks nationally saying that Texas' best win is actually the opener against Colorado State, 52-0 against a team that hadn't lost in the Mountain West yet.
Yeah,
that's the best win.
That's impressive. Yeah, Texas.
This is an SEC schedule. Texas hasn't played Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, LSU. I mean, how do you miss all those teams?
Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee.
Tennessee.
How do you miss the 5 of the 6 ranked teams in the top 20 in a single year? And the one ranked team you do play, you're down 23 points in the first half at home. Mm-hmm. So, look, preseason polls, I know fans say they don't matter. They most certainly do in the eyes of the committee.
Why have a playoff? I mean, I don't. People are talking about putting SMU in. I mean, the best team they played beat them.
Yeah.
They struggled to beat Nevada. I mean, I don't get it.
And BYU beat them 18-15. Yeah.
Hey, Brad, I mentioned this the other day with Mike, and I maybe something for you to mull over and potentially write about down the road.
Yeah.
If you want to. Obviously, it's your pen in your hand, not mine. But one of you just mentioned the rankings, the preseason rankings when it comes to the AP Top 25, and a lot of people look at that, me included, and go, well, these things don't really matter when you're getting into the season, of course, because we see so many teams drop out that aren't supposed to be there. But as you pointed out, they do matter, and they're never going away, right? Because when you start the season, the networks, they want those little numbers next to all the names so they can promote games and make money. Well, the college football playoff rankings come out in November, and there was a reason for that when they designed this, of course, to be able to have a bunch of data and then be able to roll out these rankings and explain that, and they'll know who everybody is by November. My question is, why not begin the college football playoff rankings from the point of transparency after the 3rd week of the season? Because we've moved into a new era of the playoff. We're in 12. Eventually, it's going to be 14. I'm projecting it's going to be 16. I think a lot of people are. Why not move to a basketball-style ranking system where you begin after the 3rd week, you have your top 25, you have your first 4, and then you have your next 4. And these things can be charted throughout the season. And my point is, because South Carolina is the perfect example to be able to have this conversation with and about. The Gamecocks, after opening 2-0 and beating Kentucky by 25 points on their home field, at that point in time, it had caught some eyes because if we all remember correctly, most of the nation doesn't, but we do. This circle does. Kentucky was perceived to be a pretty decent football team in the SEC. And then you would have moved into the LSU game. We all saw it. We know what happened. Bad calls, injuries, et cetera, et cetera. You're able to track teams who would be bubble teams much better and more transparency, like 2 or 3 lost teams like the Gamecocks are. So when you get to the end of the season, you can go back and you basically have 9, 10, 11 weeks worth of data points that proves the up and down and the why of every ranking? I know that was a long diatribe there, but what do you think about starting it earlier for the sake of transparency because of a larger playoff now?
Part of the reason is because the Associated Press Top 25 has been around since 1936.
Mm-hmm.
And if we start making the playoff poll more important than the AP poll and say like week 3, the AP is going to have a fit with this. I mean, the AP poll right now in college football at any point in November does not matter. The only rankings that matter is every Tuesday night, the playoff rankings. A lot of fans don't realize that. They're mad the Gamecocks didn't move up enough in the AP poll, but they're 14 in the coaches. All that doesn't matter. What matters is tonight where the committee has South Carolina. That's all that matters. And I think part of the reason for these playoff rankings, where we have 5 every year now, starting after Halloween, leading up to the first weekend of December, Selection Sunday, is because it's a made-for-TV event, man. The entire college football playoff is made for TV. ESPN pulls all these strings. Big Ten, SEC commissioners. That's why you see Sankey lobbying for certain programs. He has not come out publicly for South Carolina yet, by the way. And when I was in the press box for the A&M game, Sankey was like 2 rows up watching that game. By the second half, he was gone. So I think he was there to watch A&M and not South Carolina. So now he's got some maybe explaining to do. So I'll find it very interesting if here in about 2 weeks, if the Gamecocks are on that threshold after beating Clemson, if they're 9-3 with 6 straight wins, will the SEC's leading mouthpiece vouch for, little old Carolina? We'll see here soon.
Wow.
It depends on what brands are right there with them record.
Correct.
That's my opinion. Yeah. Because he's going to fight for Bama.
Got to handle business in Death Valley for any of this stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's where we're going next. All right, so we think Carolina tonight, 15, 14 maybe. You think Clemson's in the top 12 tonight?
Yes, I think Clemson's going to be ahead of South Carolina tonight. And I think Clemson right now has a better shot at reaching the playoff, despite having no wins right now over bowl-eligible teams.
Can you explain
without winning the ACC? Like if Miami and SMU played for the ACC title, Clemson finishes the year at 10-2 with a win over South Carolina, you think they could get in?
I do. I think Clemson would be the second ACC team to get in over the ACC championship game loser if that's SMU, because you got to think Gamecocks are going to be top 15, right? And if Clemson beats South Carolina, that's their biggest win of the year. And that's going to carry weight heading into that last ranking. So I think, go ahead.
No, Pitt's bowl eligible. They've just lost. The bottom's falling out. They're 7-4.
Right. Sorry. No top 25 wins, and then one win.
No, and then one win over Pitt. It was a miracle, really.
It was a miracle. They shouldn't have won the game.
A miracle from the Lord.
But
seriously,
I wouldn't say Clemson controls its own destiny, just like Carolina doesn't either. But a Clemson win this weekend, I'd put their odds at making the playoff at least 50-50.
Why does the committee love Louisville so much? I never understood why they got ranked like they did after beating Clemson. They played all right. So they played SMU tight. They played Miami tight. They played Notre Dame tight. So they didn't win. They lost to Stanford this past one of the most amazing finishes I've ever seen. Just when you thought the season couldn't get any weirder, that Stanford Louisville game was just bizarre.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, I'm a big fan of Jeff Brom and the Cards and all that, but it's like Clemson got a lot of mileage out of losing to them at home.
Yeah, before that loss to Stanford, Louisville was the highest ranked 3-loss team, and that was because they had 3 one-possession losses to top 20 teams. Like you mentioned, Notre Dame, SMU, Miami. They scored a lot of points in all those games. Defense did not hold up its end of the bargain. All I can say is maybe Louisville's game control is more impressive than what they actually look like. I don't think Louisville passes the eye test. And the eye test is the most subjective ranking out there, but it's something that the committee has really placed a heavy emphasis on this weekend. They say that they're not supposed to incentivize margin of victory, but if the Gamecocks say we're to beat Clemson, 38-7 Saturday, I mean, maybe you want to go ahead and pencil the Gamecocks in because eye test really matters these last 2 weeks.
I question about this too, because they just decided to forget. And I look, I thought Bama should have been in over Florida State last year, but they just forgot about 13 wins because a team didn't have its quarterback. South Carolina, we forget about the refs, because you can't. The committee can't consider that. I've said that. I mean, we the whole country said Carolina got robbed against LSU, but you can't, as a committee, go, yeah, the refs screwed them, so we're going to forget it. But you can consider, because it's in their doctrine, it's written down, injuries to key players. Lenore Sellers, playing as good as anybody in the country right now, obviously was playing well in the LSU game, missed almost the entire second half. Why would you not consider that if you're kind of looking at South Carolina versus kind of Alabama-ish, Ole Miss-ish, Tennessee-ish, all at 9-3? Why would you not consider that? I mean, I think if it was Alabama, the whole country would be like, well, Milroe missed the second half. But nobody's talking about that.
That'll be a big discussion point next Saturday night when the committee deliberates for a final time. And, JC, I've seen a lot of fans mention, why are we talking all these chaos scenarios right now before the Clemson game? Why aren't these mentioned Saturday afternoon after that game's over and the Gamecocks win? Well, part of the reason is because you only have about an 8-hour window before the rankings would come out following that weekend. I mean, it's very important to kind of get in the committee's ear right now that, South Carolina is one of the hottest teams in the country, and there are tons of national analysts kind of barking about the Gamecocks right now. I just find it interesting that, the committee chair right now, Ward Manuel, has not mentioned the Lenora Sellers injury. I mean, we saw how handcuffed that playbook was in the second half with Robbie Ashford at quarterback. You lose your best player on the field, and you only have 1 or 2 play calls now. And that's part of the reason that 17-point lead was squandered and the Gamecocks lost that game. So I think it's something that the committee has not considered yet, but they will 2 weeks from now when, final rankings come out.
I don't think Ward Manuel knows his left from his right sometimes, but that's for a whole nother day. We don't have you for 2 hours today, Brad, so we won't lead you down that road. As far as the game goes this weekend, it's a noon kick on ESPN, and the voice of the Clemson Tigers will be calling it, Roy Philpott, which is fantastic. Good for ESPN in assigning that.
No problem with that, because he's not coming off the edge. He's not having to block South Carolina. Hey, whatever.
It doesn't matter, right? What I will say, Taylor Davis is on the sidelines, and she's wonderful. She does a great job. So here we go. Looking for consecutive victories up there. 2 years ago, going into that game, although Carolina had just hung 63 on the Vols, I don't think anybody thought they were better than Clemson. But the ball bounced their way that day, and Juice Wells opened up a can of from the outside, and Spencer Rattler hit him in stride multiple times, and they won the game. This year, there is an argument that South Carolina is better than Clemson, but would you make that same argument? And what are you going to be paying attention to, especially early in the ball game, that might dictate how the rest of it goes?
This is the first time, JB, in maybe a decade that I've felt South Carolina should be favored on the road at Clemson. I think Gamecocks are a better football team. I think they have better talent across the board this season. Quarterback play right now is elite at both programs, but Lenoris has done it the last month against top 25 competition, and Cade Klubnik has not. Now, Clemson's offensive line right now is a mash unit. They are really banged up front. Every Clemson source I've talked to this week has kind of told me off the record, this Clemson staff is a little bit worried about these edge rushers for the Gamecocks because tackle play has not been good this season at Clemson, and they haven't faced this kind of talent and bend and speed rush off the edge that they're going to see Saturday. Now, that being said, I think Lenora Sellers has to play extremely well. He has the last 6 starts. All those fumbling issues and turnovers that were a problem in September have not shown up recently. And you see the Gamecocks offense, how well it's played because of that. If Gamecocks can avoid those, critical mistakes that they've given Clemson in the first quarter or so the last couple of years, I think Gamecocks win this game. I look for Nick Harbor maybe even to have a big game. He has really played well the last month. I know he doesn't have a 100-yard game yet, I don't think, but maybe that comes this weekend. Gamecocks need to just do their best to win the line of scrimmage. Whoever wins the line of scrimmage is going to win this weekend at Memorial Stadium, and I think the wrong team's favored right now.
Yeah, it's Josh Simon being healthy is a huge key to this. Tony Morrell is reporting he thinks he's going to be able to go. But to your point on Harbor, and let's throw in Dale Von Campbell, who's got over 200 receiving yards in the last 2 games combined.
Mm-hmm.
If these threats are starting to emerge, and they can keep Sellers standing upright, you got Simon who's catching the ball, and Jared Brown, and Dale Von Campbell, and Josh. Or I think I just mentioned Josh Simon and Nick Harbor, and then you got Rocket who catches 4 or 5 out of the backfield and of course runs the football well. You got a lot of guys you got to start paying attention to, and Clemson is they've always been a blitz happy defense, and that's going to be a key this weekend is identifying those and making sure that you can counter that. And with all those weapons, maybe they got a good chance to do so.
Yeah, the game has really slowed down for Lenore. I think he mentioned that after the A&M game when he had, 350 total yards and like 4 or 5 scores. That's not very good news for this Clemson defense. If you send too many guys at Lenoris and you got a guy in the middle like Dale Von Campbell now who has shown sort of a fearless mindset going across the middle and catching these crossing routes that are going for 30 and 40 yards. I mean, he's become an explosive threat. Getting Simon back is going to be huge, especially on 3rd down. And Rocket Sanders, this is probably the last game he'll have as a Gamecock. I mean, I don't see him playing during bowl season, most likely. They make the playoff. Obviously, that changes. But this is kind of a lasting impression opportunity against a very good defense. So if Rocket has 100 yards, he's kind of goes into that day 2 mix in the NFL. So very, very big game skill-wise for South Carolina. And like I said, man, if they limit mistakes and just giving Clemson points, it's going to be tough to move the ball consistently against this defense.
I think you want to avoid Phil Maffa softening your defense. Phil Maffa, golly, softening and Maffa's been a little banged up too, and I don't know how much room he's going to have. I think Demetrius Knight has to play well in this game.
You mean Senior Bowl invitee Demetrius?
Yeah, Demetrius Knight. You can't let them start establishing the run like Missouri kind of did in the second half. Missouri's a different scheme. I mean, that Garrett Riley's not Eli Drinkwitz in that way, and I think the scheme primarily gave Carolina all kinds of problems with the wide zone. But Clemson does run outside zone, though. They will try to do that. I'm not sure Maffa's an outside back, but well, I mean, at least Will Shipley's not there. That guy loved playing against the Gamecocks for some reason. But if they get in the throw game, I like Clemson's receivers a lot. I think they can really do some damage, especially the younger guys and Antonio Williams. But I don't like the chances of Klubnik staying in the pocket and consistently beating them down the field.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we got to get you out of here in just like 3 minutes or so, Brad. So this morning, North Carolina fires Mac Brown. What's going on there, and do you have an idea of an early list of candidates?
Yeah, I've spoken to several sources the last couple hours since that news came out from Matt Zenitz and Inside Carolina. Four names have been sort of pushed to the front. Everybody I spoke to has mentioned these 4 guys: John Sumrall at Tulane, PJ Fleck at Minnesota,
wow,
Dan Mullen, as JC said a couple hours ago, and then Will Stein, Oregon's OC. Mullen, I was told 100% wants the job. I'm not sure where the Tar Heels stand on him, or maybe that's his agent floating his name out there. But also one nugget on John Sumrall. There's a chance that Kentucky could now fire Mark Stoops to get ahead of UNC here. Sumrall has wanted the Kentucky job. I think, behind the scenes, that's been kind of evident for the last couple cycles now. And then one last point, I did ask somebody about Missouri coach Eli Drinkwitz, and this source was confident that he would not leave the SEC, for an ACC job because he's making like 9.2 or something this year with Missouri. Obviously, he's had jobs in North Carolina before, NC State coordinator and App State, but I don't see Eli leaving for UNC.
He's from Arkansas too. He's like from the Ozarks and all that. So
he's gonna go to Arkansas, and
I think Rhett
Lashley will go to. Yeah, I was about to say if Arkansas opened, I believe that's I've heard that from more than 3 people. So
what about Petrino? Is UNC going to hire Petrino then? He wants a job somewhere.
Oh, man. That'd be a disaster, wouldn't it?
It's like hiring John Blake. You know,
yeah, that'd be a disaster.
PJ Fleck's very intriguing, I think,
that is an
to me,
interesting name.
as far as that job goes. And I mean, Minnesota could match the money, but maybe not. Mullen, I'm telling you, North Carolina's tried a lot of other different things. Will Stein, that would be kind of like Fedora, just go offense. But I'm telling you, Mullen, if they've not really hired a more with less guy. I think if they went more with less, they'd probably be a lot happier. But that's
so why not just put a bug in Jimmy Sexton's ear and just ask if Nick Saban is slightly interested? Right? Now you'd have to give him $15 million and then probably shut down UNC basketball. But hey, I mean,
yeah, shut it down. Shut it down.
Yeah, where's Gruden in all this talk?
gosh.
So East Carolina's open, North Carolina's open. Somebody told me App State's going to end up opening, and
they are out on Sean Clark. ECU is promoting Blake Harrell, which that's an emotional hire, man, and not often do emotional hires work.
So how many jobs end up opening in the great state of North Carolina this year?
Charlotte's open right now. Charlotte's a pretty good job. Charlotte's better off NIL wise than most G5s. Okay. And they have a new stadium coming in. I think it's 2026. So Charlotte's a job that I would look at if I'm a other G5 head coach or maybe a Power 5 coordinator.
A lot of coaches told me that they like Charlotte as a job.
Yeah, like Marcus Satterfield. He spent time in Charlotte.
Let's give it to him.
He deserves it. If anybody does,
he deserves it. He's the smartest guy ever.
It's always such a pleasure to have you on, man. Thank you so much. We know you got to get to work here, but most importantly, as we let off the segment, happy Thanksgiving to you and your children, your wife, your entire family. Hope it's a wonderful, wonderful week for you, and hopefully the Gamecocks give you something else to write about on Saturday.
Saturday should be fun around 4:00 if there's no giveaways and a bunch of mistakes out there. So we'll see.